Hello, everybody, and welcome into Senior Living Live. My name is Melissa. It is so good to see you, as always, and I hope you are having an excellent day today. Well, we thank you for joining us for, as I mentioned, our second of three webinars this month as we explore a tough topic: how to approach difficult conversations with seniors. Allyson Stanton of Stanton Aging Solutions will be our guest presenter today. She has some excellent tips on how you can do this and do it that in a way that generates positive results and a positive outcome for everyone. She will be available at the end of the presentation to answer all of your questions. We, of course, want you to be a part of the conversation. And in order to do that, you can scroll down to the bottom of your screen where it says Q&A, type out your questions there, and I will be happy to read them to Allyson at the end of her webinar. Remember, all audio and video lines will be muted throughout the presentation. Allyson, we are so delighted to have you with us today. The webinar is all yours.
Thank you for having me, and I can't see everybody, but thank you for being here with me. And I'm very excited to talk about this today. This is a huge passion of mine. I've been a social worker in the healthcare industry for 25 years, working in different communities, advocating for people. And then I started my own business 4 years ago as a aging life care manager. So now I get to just represent my clients and not represent an organization. And what I've learned in my career, it's just become a huge passion of mine, is that people need to have a voice. People deserve a voice, and we should all have a voice. And when we don't have these necessary conversations, then we're losing the ability to be empowered, to have a voice for ourselves and for our loved ones. So today, that's what I'm going to be really focusing on. And again, there is at the end a question and answer. So that will be my favorite part. I look forward to helping you with anything you have a question about. The older population is booming. And I just want to read this fact real quick, this fact and figure, but this slideshow and this presentation today isn't really about age. And I think it's a misnomer that people believe that we start talking about advanced directives. We start maybe talking about how we want to die, and how we want to optimize comfort and how we want to live when we get older and we can't live alone anymore. Well, push that maybe thinking aside, and let's try and, open up our mind and talk about and think about, what if something happens now? How do I want to be treated? So age is important, and that's when we tend to have these discussions, but I also want us to be open and think about just having these conversations and start talking about things. But real quick, so people are living longer. By 2050, the world's population age 60 and over is expected to be 2 billion. That's up from 900 million just in 2015. The current growth of the population age 65 and older is driven by the largest baby boom generation, is unprecedented in US history. So these numbers are coming. The age of us living longer is going to double. Alzheimer's could be tripling by 2050. So these are things that as a society, as a culture, we all have to be prepared for. Why is this important? So this is important because you heard the statistics I just went over. Believe it or not, only 37% of Americans have advanced directives in place, have these conversations, and have legal documents where we appoint a power of attorney that's going to make decisions for us, or where we have things in writing about how I want to be treated and how I don't want to be treated. Only 37% of Americans have this in place, which is a very low number. So what does this mean to me is that people aren't talking about it. People aren't doing this. And more importantly, people just aren't thinking about it. And I guess because of what I do and what my career is in, it's something I think about all the time. And maybe my own husband or my family are sick of hearing about it. But these are things that really we need to think about. So I want to get that 37% of people that have this stuff in place. I want to get that to be a much higher number. So that's kind of my goal at the end of this today. Um, and why do we want to do this? We don't know our fate. We don't know what's going to happen to us and when it's going to happen to us. So why test it? Why just make pretend nothing's ever going to happen? We don't know our fate. And when we talk to our loved ones about that, or I mention it to people, they laugh or they say, "Yeah, you're right. We definitely don't." Then I'll say, "Well, let's start talking about things if there's a change or something happens." Anything can happen. We should really have a plan. Let's be proactive, not reactive. It is not a taboo subject at all. It's, again, like it makes me feel alive to talk about it, to have a voice, to have things in place. And one of the slides, I'm going to go over common obstacles and myths, but it's really not taboo. And some cases, like I had someone in a nursing home. I was a social work director in many nursing homes for many years, and I still consult in some and giving advice to people. But when a family member has an elderly relative, I had a client, he was 87 years old, he had dementia, not really advanced yet, not deemed incapable, which is not something I really strive to do right off the bat with my clients. But the family wanted to stop treatment and stop making certain decisions. And I said, okay, well, do you have, your medical power of attorney document? Do you have your father's medical directive? So I can see what his wishes are. And I can see that you're able to make these decisions. Oh, well, I'm just power of attorney, the son said. And I said, well, let me see it. And he's like, well, we don't have it in writing. So if you don't have it in writing, you do not have this document. It doesn't exist. You are not power of attorney if you don't have it in writing. And then, going on to discuss with him what would your father want? Well, I never discussed this with him. I never asked, my dad if he would want a feeding tube or if he wants to be resuscitated. And what happens is in healthcare, with the Healthcare Decisions Act, obviously people are protected. So our family members can't just come in and start making decisions and withdrawing treatment. There's a lot of things that go into this for this to happen. So that's why it's important to have these things in place. So, how and when do we have these conversations? For me, it's honestly just being honest, being transparent, being where the person is, definitely being understanding, empathy, listening to hear and to understand, not to reply. I think sometimes when we have an agenda in mind and we're meeting with people, we are so focused on our agenda and what we want to say that we're not focused on listening to our loved ones or what the client wants to say. So it's really important that you be present to where they are. Less is more. So when you have these discussions, whether it's putting things in place in a home, moving to a higher level of care, maybe to an assisted living or a retirement community, or discussing what are your wishes if you have a stroke or if you have a fall or you can't feed yourself anymore. Like, talk about that and listen to your loved one. Don't talk about, well, I know we have to sell the house and you've Aunt Bessie's piano in the living room that you always wanted to keep. Like, leave that stuff for later. So less is more. So kind of focus on what you want to talk about, whatever the discussion is that you're having with your loved one. And there's no right or wrong. So sometimes, when I'm having a meeting with a family and I'm asking the adult parent, because they're like, oh, well, ask my mom. I never asked her this. And the adult parent tends to be so open and willing to discuss it. But sometimes their answer is very surprising to the other family members. So they'll say, oh, I didn't know, she wanted a ventilator or this or that. And, they can't judge. We have to be quiet. So again, like there's no right or wrong. We're doing this discussion to find out what are people's wishes. What do they think about this? It's a philosophy of life, of care, of decision making. So let them embrace it and talk about it and just listen. One of the questions I think I'm often asked is when to have these types of conversations. When is now? I have this little thing I say, if you wait, it's too late. While you can have it, have this discussion, because sometimes people do wait, then they put it off, and then unfortunately, it's too late. And the person doesn't really have a voice anymore, or the loved ones never had these necessary discussions, so they have no idea what their loved one would want or what type of decisions to make. Mm. So common obstacles and myths when it comes to advanced care planning is, I don't have enough assets, it's just not worth it. And there's no amount that's too small. There's no limit. It's important to do it even with the littlest amount. You want things, going to who you want them to go to, and you want your family to have peace and peace of mind when things end. I think you know the comedian, that passed away with frontotemporal lobe dementia, and he committed suicide. He was diagnosed with dementia. He had Robin Williams everything in place, and the family still went to court. I don't know if people followed that at all, but it was an interesting case with a new wife and children from a previous marriage, and how kind of ugly things can get. So no matter what you have, now he obviously had a lot of assets and things, but even if you have a little, you don't want to have family discord. Some people are afraid of costs, that the costs are prohibitive, and they're not. Like meeting with elder law attorneys or any attorney, estate planning, there's free legal aid and advice in every state and county, has an office on aging, has legal aid offices. Don't let the money scare you, because there's ways that you can get it done and it doesn't need to cost that much. Another obstacle or myth that I hear often is that my kids will deal with it. My kids will take care of it. I have 3 kids. It's not an issue. Well, please don't do that, because it causes stress. It's draining emotionally and financially on your kids if you don't want them to go through that. It again can cause family discord and fights. You really want one person kind of appointed to help manage everything. And when you do this, you want to have these discussions. Like, don't just do this stuff and then put it away in a file in a back office where no one knows where it is and they can't find it, or you never review it. Like, I recommend people as we get older to look at it every year, review it annually, pull it out, look at it. And obviously, with any significant change in status, you want to look at this stuff as it might need to be updated. And when you do it, share it with your family. Let your kids know. You can have a family meeting, a barbecue, a Zoom, or if you just want the person who's appointed, let them know, meet with them and say, I drafted these documents. I want you to have a copy. This is what it says. And would you like to talk about it? For some reason, a lot of people tend to hide it and keep it close to their chest, but it really should be, if you're a family and you trust each other, these are things that we should be sharing with each other. Um, Another one I hear obstacle is, I don't need one, I'm married. I don't need advanced directives in place. I don't need an estate plan, a trust, anything like that. My husband will take care of it. Well, What if something happens to you and your husband, right? At my age, I have to have things in place. What if my husband and I are in the car tonight and something happens? I definitely want my older children to know where things are and what we want and what we don't want. So just because you have a husband or you have somebody, it doesn't mean you don't need to have this stuff in place. One other common one is I'm afraid if I do it, I'm going to die. So sometimes when I ask people if they have it, they say, I'm not dying. So I always say, it's not about dying, it's about living. This isn't going to make you die. I've never met anyone that, came to see me in a hospital or for a stroke or called me because of a change in condition. And the change happened because they met with an attorney and drew up documents. So having these things in place and meeting with an attorney isn't gonna cause you to have a catastrophe or something happen. So this is probably one of my favorite slides, and something that I love talking about is to be informed. In order to make any decision, we need to be informed, right? Like, how can I make a decision if I'm not informed about what's going on? And this is probably a whole separate presentation in healthcare and navigating the healthcare system and treatment options and stuff, is how to find out, how do I ask the right questions to the doctor? What are my treatment options? What is my prognosis, right? I mean, that's kind of a whole different thing. But this today, I'm more focusing on, in order to make a decision for a family member with maybe how to pursue treatment or how to make a decision with end of life care. The only way you can do it, and you can do it right, is if you are present with where your loved one is. And I have a quote here that I keep on my desk. It's Maya Angelou, and it says, "If you must look back, do so forgivingly. If you must look forward, do so prayerfully. However, the wisest thing you can do is be present in the present gratefully." A lot of times in healthcare, and it took me a long time to learn this, because unfortunately, the social worker is often the one, and that can be fortunately, but it can be unfortunately, but often it wasn't the healthcare providers or the physicians having these discussions with family. So it took me a while when I would talk to people about hospice, again, which isn't a scary thing. It's about philosophy of treatment and care and dignity, not about end of life and dying. But having a discussion with a family and saying, let's think about where your loved one is right now and being present with them, not where they were a year ago and not where we want them to be in a year, but where they are right now. And until we go to that place and we embrace them in that place, only then can we make the right decision. So this again is just really important to me. And I think being present is critical in any time in life, helping people going through life transitions. And it's hard to be present, but that's why there are people there, to help you with it. And let me see. One of the things I was going to mention is, if you can't do it alone, is to call in, a social worker or a care manager or a physician or an attorney. Sometimes having a third party coming in and helping you kind of mediate the conversation, it takes the emotion a little bit out of it. Also, tend to be more maybe educated or and trained in these conversations and have seen certain things, why we know it's empowering to have these talks and stuff. So I think that's it for my slides. And so now we can do Q&A, if we can get back to Melissa. Mary Kate, are you there?
I think that you had a lot of food for thought there, and we do have a couple of questions. So let's start with Ken. He asked, what is a good way to bring up the topic of dementia with a family member that doesn't recognize they are slipping? And this can be a spectrum of, you know, diagnoses that we see with dementia, or it could be somebody with Lou Gehrig's disease, or multiple diseases. So how do you answer this particular question?
So sensitively, but I think it is very important if someone you believe is starting to have a type of dementia. There's many types, but with neurocognitive impairment, one of the most important things is to get a diagnosis, right? So you can be informed and your loved one can be informed. So I would recommend, because you can't diagnose your loved one, is to get testing, is to see a neurologist. You could start with your primary care physician, and most places, I don't know where you are and what state you're in, but a lot of good hospitals have memory clinics that do thorough testing that will not only diagnose your loved one, but also give you a lot of resources. So start with your primary care physician or go to a neurologist. It's very important to be diagnosed because dementia, there's irreversible and there's reversible dementias. So you really want to rule out that it's an irreversible, maybe caused from a urinary tract infection, hydrocephalus, medication interaction, right? Many things can cause a temporary dementia. So you really want to be, accurately tested, diagnosed, and then you're going to want to plan for your future because it is a progressive disease. It does go through stages, whereas having all these conversations then will come into play.
So, on the heels of that, if you have somebody who has created an end of life will, or they have things in place and they are starting to slip away because of the disease, and you had mentioned, going back and checking that and checking in with the person each and every year to ensure this is still their wish and their desire. What do you do in that situation?
Well, with dementia and any neurocognitive impairment, there are stages. So just because somebody has a diagnosis of a dementia doesn't mean that they're now incapable. And one thing as a patient advocate that I fight for is really always giving somebody a voice, even in the end stages of dementia, even if they can no longer talk due to expressive aphasia, they should have a voice. So the biggest mistake is when someone says, I have dementia, so my mom has dementia, so you need to talk to me. Or they take the loved ones to the doctor and they're ignoring the patient because they have dementia. So just because someone has dementia and they have these things in place, I guess once you get the diagnosis, pull this stuff out. If you don't have it, do it quickly, because once they're deemed incapable, it's too late to do this stuff. So, and then once they have the diagnosis, just pull it out and review it. Your job as the medical power of attorney is to honor their wishes, not yours. So pull out these documents and honor them.
So, would your suggestion for this and someone like Ken be to include this in maybe that yearly checkup, to include a memory check each and every year as you would with any other normal yearly checkup?
Physicians now are being encouraged with Medicare, with this complex care and reimbursement and stuff, to really be doing like PHQ-9, mood depression screening, as well as cognitive screening. It's not happening like it should be and like we need it to be. But yes, you're kind of asking two things, I guess. So annually, I do think people should be pulling out these documents and looking at them. But anytime there's a new diagnosis or a change in status, yes, you should be pulling out and looking at it. And if you're taking your loved one to a physician, or you have a relationship with them and your mother allows it, you can shoot them an email or call them. Can you please assess my mom? She's repeating the same thing over and over again. She got lost driving home yesterday. She's forgetting what she just told me. She forgot what she ate for breakfast. She's not oriented to the date. Whatever signs or symptoms you're seeing, don't ignore them and bring attention to the physician.
Yeah, excellent answer. Thank you so much for that, Allison.
Mhm.
And this is a good time if you're watching and you've joined us today, and maybe you're in a situation where you have a loved one and you're having a really hard time starting that conversation as they age. What are their desires? What are their wishes? um, this is the time to ask those questions and to talk to a professional like Allyson, who can maybe help navigate you to start that conversation or to restart that conversation if you have a parent or a loved one that has maybe been a little uncooperative. On that end, Cynthia has a question. My mother and father have Alzheimer's with dementia and require a home health caregiver. I have brought in a person to help in a few days a week, but my mother is still present enough in her mind to be resistant to their help and uncooperative. Do you have any language suggestions that I can use to get my mother to become less territorial and accepting of their help? 700 miles away, and there are no other family members, friends, or neighbors who can help.
Oh, that's tough, but you are not alone. This is happening every day, I promise you. So I think it's hard with dementia because I think we know it's a disease of the brain, right? And there's atrophy and things are going on, but often from our shoulders to our feet, like we're healthy, we're walking, and we have decreased insight. So I think the impaired insight and the poor judgment and impaired safety awareness is one of the hardest things with dementia because like your mom, she has dementia, but she's still with it enough that she's saying, I don't need this out. I'm fine due to the impaired insight and judgment she has. So I guess for me, it would be again the talking to her about it, like, well, dad has dementia and you do have a diagnosis, mom, and it's not nothing you can't help, but if you want to age in place and stay home safely, these are things that we have to have in place, otherwise something's going to happen. We're going to have to increase more care, or we might have to look at taking you and dad, considering assisted living or a different living environment. So will you work with me? You could also call your area office on aging, and the Alzheimer's Association has fabulous tips. So I recommend going to the Alzheimer's Association, the local office on aging where your mom lives, and there should be aging life care managers wherever she is. And you can email me and I can help find you one. There's no charge for that. I'm happy to refer you to somebody or talk with you separately, but it is very hard when the insight is impaired.
Yeah, and on the heels of that, when do you start to make that suggestion for assisted living or a senior living community when it comes to a diagnosis of Alzheimer's or dementia? So for someone like Cynthia, when may it be time to bring up that subject?
It's usually safety, is when we make the decision. And again, like going back to the beginning of this whole presentation, is what are their goals and what are their concerns? A lot of times I ask people like, well, if, of course people say, I want to age in place, I want to stay home, but maybe they have a disease that's really going to progress and they're going to need 24-hour care. Well, 24-hour care at home could be up to $20,000 a month. Maybe you can't afford that. So we can get assisted living, with 3 chef prepared meals, 24/7 care, geriatric nursing assistance support, and activities and social stimulation, and a doctor that comes in to see you for $6,000 a month, depending on the territory, of course. So I think finding out what their goals are and then again informing them, right? How can they make a decision if they're not informed? So informing them of what aging in place looks like, what it costs, and informing them of what options and resources there are. But as far as having to step in and make the decision, it usually comes down to safety. People wandering and leaving the house, leaving a stove on. There's things that we can do. We can turn the stove off. We can get a life alert. We can get the wander bracelet through the Alzheimer's Association. But really, when it's 24/7, someone needs 24/7 care, it's really time to look at moving. Or if someone's just extremely socially isolated and depressed and there's poor diet, it really depends on the situation.
And the good news is on that end, there are a lot more options out there when it comes to memory care communities where people can speak that language that she asked about, what language can we speak here to sort of help the barrier that we're experiencing. Well, they speak the language. That's what they're trained to do. And so hopefully this has answered your question, or at least given you some additional information to arm you with that next conversation with mom and dad. So, Allison, I know we have touched a little bit on finances and again on wishes, and that is such a tough conversation, especially for people who've been very private about their finances. What are some tips that you can give people in approaching that particular topic, which can get some people to shut down pretty quickly?
It seems like there's two schools of thought with this. And I think, again, getting that less than 37% of Americans that are talking about this, the finances are included in that, and the estate planning and the trust planning and where we want things to go. And there's people that are very closed about it, very private, even with their own family who they love and trust. They don't want to discuss it, even if they don't have access to it and can't take it. And then there's those that are very open about it and to talk about it. I think it comes down to asking. People are intimidated and afraid to ask their mom or dad, well, what is your monthly income coming in? What can you afford? Like sometimes, working with a family that they need a higher level of care. And after we do the full clinical assessment and looking at everything, what are the numbers we're looking at here? I'll ask, and just try to ballpark it, because I don't want to invade either their complete privacy. But, what do we have coming in? Are you comfortable? If it costs $8,000 a month, and you have 2,200 coming in, then this might not be an option to you. If you have 6,000 coming in with pension and Social Security, and then you have a lot of savings and distributions, oh, okay, then this is affordable. Are you looking at the age of 72 and we have to plan to 100? Are you looking to move at the age of 92 and we're having to kind of plan to 100? So there's a lot of discussions and schools of thought that go into this, but I would say we just need to start asking. We need to start talking. How are you financially? I'm worried about you. Dad, I'm working full time. I have kids in college. I see mom's declining. We're going to start to need to hire help at home. Is this something, that you can afford? Do you want to talk to a financial advisor? Can we meet with your accountant? Can I be present? I think just honestly putting it out there and talking about it.
Yeah, and I know you're of the school of thought as well that there's never a wrong time to approach these conversations. Correct?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, the time is now, and it's terrible when people do wait. And I've seen some awful things happen to people because they waited and they didn't have these discussions. They didn't make decisions, and they might end up somewhere where they don't want to be. Nothing against nursing homes, but you always want the least restrictive level of care. Home with support, assisted living. The nursing home, it's a very small percentage of the population that lives in them. I might be in one someday. I don't want to be a burden to my family. Something happens and that's where I need to be, then I guess that's where I'll be. But I would rather avoid that. And the way to avoid that is to start talking about it, about the finances, and having long-term care insurance, or is this something we can afford? If not, should we do Medicaid spend down and meet with an attorney? You really need to talk about it, because Medicare pays for acute care, hospitalization, doctor's visits, lab tests. It's great insurance. It covers a lot, but that's skilled care. It doesn't pay for custodial care, which is private duty aides coming in the home or assisted living.
Yeah, and if you were wondering how to do that, how do I pay for my care? Well, we have many videos on our website at www.seniorlivinglive.com that, whether it's VA benefits, as you mentioned, there's Medicare for certain people, there's Medicaid, there are long-term life insurance policies. There are many different options out there. Just depends on what you have. And we don't know what you have until that conversation is had. So great answer. We have another question. What are the documents that need to be in place? So we hear this discussion of we may need an attorney. We may need to talk to somebody a care counselor. Well, when we talk to those people, what are the things that we need to, the tangible things we need to hold and have ready to go?
From my standpoint as a geriatric care manager, a medical social worker, is really the advanced directives piece, which is the medical power of attorney. Who do you want to make decisions for you when you no longer can? Something happens to you now, you go to the hospital, you call 911, the hospital's called, you're out of it. The doctor is going to ask, who am I calling? That person needs to be your medical power of attorney. You definitely need to appoint a medical power of attorney, also referred to as a healthcare agent. And that person's job is not taking over your life. They're not making decisions about you. They're making the decisions that you want made because you're not talking right now, or maybe not able to say what you want. And then the second part is of the advanced directive is the living will or the medical directive, and that's your wishes. If I'm in an end stage condition, if I have a stroke and I'm not doing well and there's no hope of recovery, what do I want? What do I not want? Do I want a feeding tube and to be kept alive artificially? Do I want to be put in a ventilator? Do I want to allow a natural progression and optimize comfort and dignity and just keep me pain free? So that's the medical directive piece. Then, and that you can do in any state where these people that are on this call, they're the attorney general at the state level. You can literally Google, if you're in Florida, Florida state advanced directives, Maryland state advanced directives, and you can do that. You can download it, it's free, and you sign it and you get two witnesses. For more estate planning and trust and financial power of attorney, which is often needed too, that you're best meeting with an elder law attorney or an estate planning attorney. And there's tons of them, probably no matter where you are.
Yeah, and the fees for something like this are fairly nominal, yes?
Yeah, they vary. Some people are like, oh, well, they'll do it for $300, $500. Some people might be a couple grand. It really depends. But do your research, get informed, call three, and then make a decision or talk to friends. A lot of people do have it in place or have thought about it and have worked with an attorney.
Yeah, so I hope, Lorraine, that answers your question. That was a really good answer, and I was unaware of the directives that were a free document that you can download from your state. So great tip there. This question comes from Deborah. My grandmother has dementia, and eventually my family will have to make a decision on a nursing home, but it is hard with COVID. Of course it is. Yes. What do you suggest during these trying times, especially since it is often brought up by her?
I don't think I can ask her a question back, but I have some questions. I guess, well, my first thing would be is why are you saying she needs a nursing home? Because assisted livings have come a long way and they're licensed and regulated as level 3, most of them. And level 3 is a very high level of care. They can assist with transferring, continence care, even feeding, and even end of life care and letting people stay there and go on hospice. So you really want to make sure an assessment's done that she needs nursing home level of care. And then as far as COVID, where I am in Maryland, the numbers are pretty low now and things are opening up. A lot of us are vaccinated here. A lot of the healthcare communities and workers are vaccinated. Hopefully, your loved one is vaccinated if they're older and they've had access to that. But I think the decision really depends on, does she need that? Does she need it? Why? And then let's find, the best place for her.
So if Deborah wants to follow up, because you do have questions, and so we can better help Deborah, I see your email and contact
Yeah,
information here. Is this
that's
the best way
fine.
to get in touch with you?
Absolutely. Yeah. If I don't answer, I will call you back. I promise. I'm happy to talk to you for a little bit and see if I can help you. Going back to the advanced directives real quick, the medical directive, Melissa, I just want to share there's something called 5 wishes. And that's what I have. And that's just something that I think it's $5. You could Google it. And it's a great like pamphlet of where you can really write out your wishes. Like I want classic rock and roll played in the background, and I want candles, and I want my friends to visit me, and please keep me at home if possible. So it really gets more specific and into the wishes of what we want spiritually and everything.
And that might be a really good way to open up that conversation, to break that ice, because you're giving them a document that they can look at any time at their convenience. And really, when they've had time to think about how they want to answer those questions, instead of being put on the spot, maybe that's the way to go for some of you out there is to take that piece of paper, say, hey, when you've got a chance, fill this out for me and be honest. You're not going to hurt my feelings no matter what you say, and really pull out the truth and what the wishes really are. I think that is
Mhm.
an excellent tip.
Yeah, you can share information and have them think about it. The other thing is you could talk to the physician about it, especially if someone, I don't think we need to wait until someone's declining, but if your loved one's not talking about it yet and they are declining and maybe they have an Alzheimer's diagnosis and it is advancing, or Parkinson's or something, you can talk to the physician and say, my mom doesn't have this stuff in place yet. I really don't know what she wants. Can you please, have this discussion with her, especially like COPD or congestive heart failure? These are diagnoses that are very hard to manage. And sometimes just medically managing things, the physicians will be like, yes, that's a good idea. Let's talk about this. We should know what the wishes are. And also in many states, in Maryland, we have a form called the Maryland Orders of Life Sustaining Treatment. They used to be called EMS DNR forms, and they changed them throughout years in different states. But we are all a full code status unless stated otherwise. So, like even yesterday, I was with a client and she said, "Oh gosh, I definitely want to be DNR. Let me go." And the family member said, "Oh, I had no idea." And I said, we cannot honor that because she doesn't have this MOS form in place. So if she does have cardiac arrest and EMS comes, they are resuscitating her. They are putting her on a ventilator. Your full code unless stated otherwise. So you really have to have a DNR in writing.
And that goes back to those important documents that Lorraine asked about earlier. What do I need? Well, there's another piece of the information for you, Lorraine. I hope you're still watching. There are so many pieces to this puzzle, and that's why we have people like you out there, Allyson, who can help place and put that puzzle together in a nice, beautiful picture. We do have another question here from Lorraine. Who or how does the assessment level of care get done? That's a great question.
So each state, in Maryland, we have something called like a 3871. It's a level of care form. Assisted livings have like healthcare practitioner assessments or a resident assessment tool. So we all have these tools, these forms that we use. And it's a few pages long. It takes the medical history, medications, functionality, ambulation level, mood, cognition, behavior. And then at the end, it kind of gives you like a number and it gives you a level of care. So a physician can do it, many nurses, nurse practitioners, geriatric care managers often are trained to do these. And that will give you kind of the level of care to decide if the person's nursing home level or they can go to an assisted living level of care. And nursing homes, just because we maybe can't afford aging in place and 24-hour care or assisted living, doesn't mean we can automatically go to a nursing home. You have to medically qualify and financially qualify. And in order to medically qualify, you pretty much need a very high level of care.
Excellent. Very good information. Now, we do have an interesting instance or situation here with Linda. And Linda is actually the senior. Okay. So this is coming from her perspective. She says,
Sure.
I'm the senior with my daughter far away from me. I have prepared a notebook to supplement the letter of instruction to make things easier for her. So far, she doesn't want to have the conversation. The best we have done is have her show me where the binder is every time she visits. I'm in great health. Very nice, Linda. Congratulations. And I'm in my late 70s. She's in her late 40s and a licensed social worker. Do you have any magic words to help her with her daughter in this situation?
You could tell her, I went to this webinar and, we really don't know our fate. And I just really want you to know what my wishes are, because your job is to carry out my wishes. And I really want to just sit and review this with you over a cup of coffee next time you visit. So, if you get a call, and I think you mentioned, Linda, she's far away, she should have that notebook with her. So if something happens to you and the hospital calls, or a doctor or a neighbor, she's able to look at that notebook. But it also, as a clinical social worker, I think when we get these calls, that's not when I really want to know what my mom wants, and what decisions I need to make when I'm upset and I'm frantic and something acute is going on. I really would be more comfortable knowing what my loved one wants before that happens and when I get that call.
It's hard. It is hard to think of your parents as they age and as they get older that they might not be there anymore. But it's important. So I totally understand where Linda's daughter is coming from. But it comes from all sides. You must get people of all different walks of life and ages in your office.
Definitely. I mean, and sadly, especially like with early onset Alzheimer's, that's under the age of 65, someone can have it 30 in their 30s, and Huntington's disease, someone in their 20s. So it is really, really hard. And that's why it's really not about age, and it's really not about them not being with us anymore. It's when they're here, what do they want and what do they don't want?
So we are coming up towards the top of the hour. If anyone has any more questions, this is the time to get them in for Allyson. Allyson, I have one more question for you, and maybe to bring this back full circle. What is the number one tip? Maybe it's the one you've found you give people over and over and over again that sends that light bulb moment off in their heads. Well, what would that tip be?
For me, I kind of have two. So the first one was my slide on being present. Is being present with where your loved one is. And the second one is people have the right to make bad decisions. So a lot of times in families, we see things, I cannot believe they're doing this, or like the caller on here that mentioned their parents at home and the mom not wanting help even though they need it. There comes a time where we can educate, inform, guide, and support, but people have the right to make different decisions than us, even when we know it could be bad. Now, if it's dangerous to them, that's another story. But ultimately, people have the right to make their own decisions, and they have the right to make bad decisions. And sometimes you just need to step back.
That's a great way to end this. So I believe that is all of our questions here for the webinar. Allyson, that was great. Thank you so
Thank
much
you.
for sharing your knowledge with all of us today.
Thank you so much.
And yes, we've got a couple of thank yous in the chat box from all the questions that you answered, and taking the time out of your day to help all of us.
Oh, you're very welcome.
A reminder to everybody watching that this webinar, as I mentioned, will be available on our website, www.seniorlivinglive.com, starting tomorrow. You can watch the presentation again if you joined us late, or feel free to share the link with your friends and family. That could be your mom, your dad, or it could be your children. So while you're there, you can also check out the rest of our video content all about senior living. We thank you so much for spending your time with us today. Have a great day, everybody.